Hello viewers, welcome to Daily Politics. On this program, we discuss issues around politics, policy and governance. I'm Hamza Idris. Suspected gunmen attacked an IDP camp located in a primary school in Guma local government area of Benue State on Friday, April 7, killing an unspecified number of people. According to Nathaniel Ikur, the chief press secretary to the state governor Samuel Otom, 35 bodies have been recovered and many others are seriously injured. The incident occurred 3 days after suspected gunmen reportedly killed 45 people in Otukpo, local government area of the same Benue State. And elsewhere in Zamfara State, a list of the 35 kidnapped individuals by suspected terrorists on Friday, also April 7, has been compiled by the Wanzamayu community in Zafe, local government area of Zamfara State. The victims include women and children. Parents of the victims had confirmed that the children were aged between 12 and 17 years and were in the bush fetching firewood when the terrorists abducted them. It was reported that the armed bandits loyal to Ado Aleru abducted the victims, about 85 of them. Very sad. And you will recall that Aleru, a notorious kidnapper, was given a chieftaincy title of Sarkin Fulani in 2022, which caused a serious national outrage. On the program tonight, we'll give special focus on the assessment of security agencies during the 2023 general elections, as well as security-related events that have occurred post-election. And to help make an understanding of this, I'm joined in the studio by Dr. Kabiru Adamu. He is a security and intelligence expert, as well as the managing director of Beacon Consulting Limited, a firm which provides enterprise risk and security management solutions here in Nigeria. We are also joined virtually by Bulama Bokarti, a human rights lawyer, and he joins us from London. Gentlemen, welcome to the program.
Thank you very much, Malanda.
Okay, we'll go on a quick break now, and when we return, the conversation commences. Stay with us. Yes, Doctor, let me start with you before we go to London. Before the election, there was an aura of peace. I may be wrong, but this is what many Nigerians are saying. But suddenly, after the election, back to square one. What was your assessment based on the taps you keep on happenings ahead of the election? Let's start before the election, yeah.
Yeah, so definitely there was an improvement in the general security atmosphere before the elections, during the elections, and then in the few days after the elections. So what does data tell us? Data tells us that in the month of January, as an example, the abduction rate decreased by almost 65%.
In January?
In January. So when you compare December and January, we have a reduction of about 65% or thereabout. We had an abduction rate of less than 200 in the country, from a figure of around 600 in last year. Now, in February, there was a slight increase to slightly above 200. And then in March, it went back to where we were, about 400.
And we held the presidential election February, right?
Exactly. Now, that is for abduction. If we look at the fatality figures, we also saw the same pattern. In January, a reduction. In February, a slight increase, and then in March, a higher increase as well. Now, for the election day violence itself, on the day of the elections on February 25th, we lost 22 Nigerians.
On the day of the presidential election, presidential and National Assembly election, 22 Nigerians.
22 Nigerians were killed. However, on the day of the governorship elections and state assembly elections, that number tripled.
Meaning we had more than 60.
66 persons were killed
on
that day. So all in all, on the 2 election days, about 88 Nigerians were killed. Now, not all the deaths were the result of election violence.
Okay.
So as an example, where we saw the highest death was in Zamfara State. Now, some of the incidents that occurred on March 18th were not exactly election related.
Okay.
They were non-state armed groups that attacked vulnerable
the so-called
communities.
bandits.
Exactly.
That have been declared terrorists.
And killed them. So that brings me to the next point, which is just before the elections, there was a massive deployment of security forces.
Yeah.
Now, as an example, the police told us they deployed 300,000 personnel, even though there were doubts regarding that number.
Yes, we always question the figures. Road safety will tell you that they deployed 1,000 something.
Exactly.
Civil defense
would do the same thing. So we're told that about 400,000 security paramilitary plus police personnel were deployed. The military also conducted Operation, I think, Safe Conduct.
Yes.
That it called. So all of that meant the ability of these non-state actors to operate was limited.
It was restricted because of the massive deployment.
Yeah. So automatically we saw a reduction in the number of incidents that were happening. But immediately after the elections, I think what happened was most of these security forces that were deployed were redeployed back to their bases.
Where is their basis? Maybe the politicians. Let's hear Bulama. Bulama, what is your take on this? Before election, you have had Dr. Kabiru here in the studio saying abduction released by about 65% in January compared to December. In February, it rose slightly. Then in March, back to square one. Is it that these politicians and the leaders, they are only concerned about the election, that we are witnessing this?
Unfortunately, that's the message the reduction as well as the efforts made around the election would send to the average Nigerian. Because as Dr. Kabiru Adamu alluded, the evidence shows that it is the heavy deployment of security and law enforcement agencies to the states that is responsible partly for the reduction in the fatalities and the abductions that we have seen around the elections. For example, some would say about 300 trucks were deployed to Zamfara. I would doubt the figure of 300, but you could say a large amount of soldiers and police officers and other law enforcement agencies were deployed to states like Zamfara, which is in the front line of bandit attacks. Now, and the question the average Nigerian would ask is, if you can deploy these heavy security and law enforcement agents across Nigeria because of elections, where were they before elections? Why are you taking them back after elections? Why is are the lives and properties of Nigerians not important enough to be protected before or after elections when you are not engaged in elections? These are some of the questions, unfortunately, the average Nigerian would ask. Some of us would know that the answers might be more complicated, more nuanced than these simplistic questions, but you cannot avoid the questions because you can't deploy heavy security around elections, but once elections are over, the security is nowhere to be found. That's going to put doubts in the mind of Nigerians. The second point that is related to reduction in fatalities and abductions is the question of shortage of naira and fuel.
Okay.
We know that just before the election, fuel was so scarce, and therefore the scarcity of fuel across Nigeria also affected the armed groups. They are not immune. They were not immune by the scarcity, and because they don't have enough fuel to operate, it became difficult for them too. And because naira was short, and some of them are operating for economic reasons, like the bandits, it became impossible for them to extort money, even if they abducted individuals. And even where they were able to abduct the old naira notes, they became useless for them. But after the elections, we know that the government has rolled back on some of its policies around the naira, and therefore we have seen more and more old notes becoming available. And perhaps that's one of the reasons why we are seeing an increase in the in incidents, both in terms of abductions, but also in terms of fatalities since the elections.
Okay, yes, Bulama, honestly, you are on point because we discussed this during our editorial meeting. earlier in the day. But is it really normal? Because Naira, fuel, they are part and parcel of our lives. And if you don't have them, meaning that something is wrong. Now, does this mean that we should now ensure that there is no Naira, there is no fuel, so that we will contain sundry criminals? Or somebody should pay a price for not doing his work?
No, I don't think it is normal. No society can live without Naira, without fuel, without money, without fuel. And experts would tell you the hit the Nigerian economy took because of those two shortages as well as others. It is lost in billions of Naira because of the Naira policy that was rushed in and because of the fuel policy. But we can't run away from the fact that that did reduce incidents of criminality, banditry, and terrorism. For example, it was Daily Trust and other newspapers, if my memory serves me well, that reported how Boko Haram's faction, ISWAP, the Islamic State West Africa province, the Boko Haram faction related to ISIS, that came out on the high road and started distributing the old Naira notes, mostly in 100,000 Naira for motorists, for passengers on the road, because they knew it was going to be useless for them. And I think the lesson this sends us is that the government, if it did well in blocking the supply, in cutting off supply of money and fuel and arms to the armed and terrorist groups, then we would go a long way in curbing these menace. The problem, unfortunately, is that government continues to fight, troops continue to get deployed into to the front line, but unfortunately, terrorists and criminals are still able to access guns, they are able to access drugs, they are able to access money, they are able to access fuel. And if you fight terrorists and criminals, but their supply routes continue to flow in, it is as if your bath water has flowed, your bath has flowed, you are scooping the water, but you have left the tap running. And so the tap continues to run and you continue to use a cup or something to scoop. It will never finish.
Wow, that's it. You had Bulama, doctor. But he, you know, while answering the first question I asked, you know, he started with a kind of question that, okay, before the elections, the troops were somewhere. I'm sure he was referring to civil defense, police, customs, immigration. They must be somewhere. And now they were deployed for a purpose. Where have they gone back to? I want you to answer this question.
Well, for each organization, we have to pick them separately and then, you know, disaggregate them. If we use the police as an example, which is the lead agency for internal security, its current population hovers around 400,000.
In the whole of the country?
In the whole of the country.
Yeah.
It hovers around that. And I think out of that 400,000, probably about 375 are the deployable ones. There are others that are not deployable. Now, even among that 300,000, there are others who are involved in duties that cannot necessarily be field-based duties. As an example, those that are in the library section, those that are in the IT section, and name them. They are office-based. They can't be out in the field. And that is why some of us question that 300,000 figure that the police you know, touted that they deployed. Now, let's assume that they deployed the 300,000. When they bring them back, a significant number of them go back to their traditional duties, which is the protection of VIPs, protection of commercial areas or locations that can afford to pay money for their protection, banks, oil companies, individuals that have access to money and can afford to pay, and all of that. So a significant number of them. I know the last time there was an attempt to put a figure to that. Yes. We're told about 50% of the staff strength of the police are engaged in those kind of
VIP banks, oil companies and all that.
And Daily Trust as well.
We have one.
Possibly. So anyone who can afford to pay and who has the right contacts is likely to get those type of police personnel. And the deeper you go into some parts of Nigeria, Kano as an example, parts of the Niger Delta area, you see more of that type of deployment. Then let's not forget, there are individuals who, by virtue of their positions in government, either serving or retired, are also entitled to police personnel. So they also get this type of.
But my worry is that sometimes we see VIPs, you know, one, maybe just a member of House of Reps. I'm sorry, I'm not actually bringing down their office with 5. Yeah. It's a committee chairman, but you see him with 5 policemen, and then there is maybe DSS, 2 of them, just one person with like 10 security operatives.
Mala Hamza, the time allotted for this program will not allow us to go into the discussions of whether there is a equitable and good management of resources within our security personnel.
Architecture,
you're right. Deployment sometimes is not commensurate with the level of responsibility. And then we can even be technical. Why deploy to specific individuals? Why don't you deploy, for as an example, growing up, policing used to be based on location.
Yes.
So Jabi, as an example, the DPO in charge of Jabi will not be so much interested in Daily Trust. He may just be interested in...
Or Chida.
Chida.
Because these places are actually security areas. So, but there are some places that you begin to wonder that...
No, but point I'm trying to make is, if you look at security from that prism, where you look at locations, and then you now provide concentric cycles of policing, of security. Because we're not dealing with ghosts, we're dealing with human beings. If you provide concentric cycles, and then these criminals would have to go through these concentric cycles. Now, even if they are able to circumvent one concentric cycle, by the time they go to the second, then they are not likely to escape. Every criminal, except the suicide bomber, wants to escape. So if you deploy in that concentric cycle, the likelihood is that you will deter the criminal. Even where you don't deter the criminal, you'll be able to
and this will also curb corruption and all that.
Exactly, because the perpetrator knows he or she will not escape. So I think looking at security, instead of this commercially run security, where if you have money, you get security.
Still in our paper today, and I'm taking this to Bulama, we have this story today that this singer in Kano, that Rarara, the police authorities in Abuja, they have withdrawn 2 of his police details. But we dug into the story, and what we found out is that he paid for them, meaning that anybody who can afford it can pay and get security. Is it normal? You are in London and you've been moving around in Europe. Is it normal that any other person can just pay and you can have the number of security operatives you want, including the equipment, guns and all that they have?
It is completely abnormal, and it is even ridiculous for a country like Nigeria. It is absurd, and it is unfortunately mind-blowing that with our security situation in the country, some individuals are still able to pay their way into getting police protection. Mike Okiro, the former Inspector General of Police, once said about 150,000 of our 400,000 or so police officers are attached to VIPs. That's very important persons in the Nigerian language. And what do we do with them? What are the VIPs doing with them? They open doors for them. They shine their shoes for them. They go on errands for them. While the large majority of Nigerians, especially in the rural areas, are begging to leave. They are not begging for the economy to be better or for their children to be educated. They just want to leave. But police has been deployed to people who do not need police officers, and they end up becoming bodyguards in their house, opening doors for their neighbors and all that. I mean, it is ridiculous that a singer can go around with security details, but I can tell you there are more absurd cases. There was someone whom I knew, he is late now, who lived in Kano, who is known to be one of the most notorious fraudsters in the country, especially in northern Nigeria. But every time I went to his house when I was a lawyer, I saw police officers guarding him. And he had more than 10 cases at the time, suspicion of corruption, including by banks. And even the police has declared him wanted, but the police is protecting him after he had been declared wanted by the police. So it is ridiculous, and it puts the entire Nigerian system into question. You cannot continue to protect VIPs who do not need protection while you leave rural Nigeria exposed completely to criminals and terrorists. As we speak now, we know that some parts of rural Nigeria are effectively ruled by terrorists or bandits, and we think that's normal. It is not normal, and I think, like I said on the top, the lessons government should learn, the lesson Nigerians should learn from this is that there is security in Nigeria. I have always made this point that we may need more security and law enforcement agencies in Nigeria, as some people argue, but the major problem, as far as I am concerned today, is that we are not making good use of the numbers we have today. If you put the 17 or so security and law enforcement agencies in Nigeria together, you will find out that we have over 1 million of security and law enforcement agencies in the country. Why are they unable to police our country? Why are they, who are backed by state money, who are backed by fighter jets, who have all the resources of the state at their disposal, why are they failing to fight off criminals and terrorists who only rely on their little money and on their little budget? It is just ridiculous. One cannot believe that we can continue to live in that way. I hope the government will learn that we need to deploy more security from the VIPs and from administrative duties to the front line, and for Nigerians to wake up and demand more from government, because government can do more and we deserve more. We deserve better.
Okay. Doctor, you have had Bulama Bokarti from Tony Blair Institute for Global Change in London. He said it's quite abnormal, things like this. But in February here, we did a story on special automated program, they call it POSAP, in police, where any other person can just go to their portal, you now ask that you want so number of policemen, and then they will now look at what you want them to do for you, and then they now charge you. And they said this was approved at Federal Executive Council. So how do we reconcile now? In one fell swoop, you see the police chief saying that we have withdrawn police from VIPs. But the next morning or the next hour, you can also get this same police. Who is deceiving who, please?
So in my field, because I'm into what is called industrial security, there are 2 or 3 types of security, quote unquote. Okay. The public security, where you find all the government security forces, then industrial security, where private security players operate. Now, I've also interacted with at least 153 countries around the world.
153 countries.
And this is by virtue of the fact that I was once the chairman of an association called American Society of Industrial Security. We have membership in 153 countries, and we're able to know what goes on within the security spheres of all of these 153 countries. Why am I giving this background? Policing can have both the private and then the public phase. Now, for the public phase, these are individuals that are paid by the state to carry out policing functions. But embedded under that too, there is the possibility to have a private component for policing. In other words, just like we have in Nigeria, at the last count, over 100, I think 113 private security companies, they can be given some component of policing functions, including VIP protection and executive protection. Now, in South Africa, as an example, they've allowed that. They have the public police that provide policing for public purposes. Then you have private vendors, providers, companies that have been given a level of authority to provide private policing. So this example you gave, as an individual, I go to that portal,
Yes.
I feel what I want, the police vets it,
Yes.
they okay it, and they send it to a particular private licensed security company.
So they can still fine-tune that.
Exactly. But this is the challenge in Nigeria, and that is what I'm hoping the next administration will have to look into. We have woken up in Nigeria where the police has now been fractured. You have several components of policing function separated into different units.
Yeah.
Let me use an European country that we all know, Germany, as an example. The German police has different departments, including immigration. Immigration in Germany is a component of policing. Likewise, you have several parts of the world that have that. But in the case of Nigeria, the last time I counted about 7 different departments that carry out policing functions but are not part of the Nigerian police force.
Yeah.
NDLEA, it was a part of the police that was brought out.
Yes.
Road safety was
Fire
a part
service.
of the police. Name them. They were all, even to an extent, customs to an extent.
Oh my
So all of these are fractured components of policing. And the irony in Nigeria is this: they are all under different ministries.
So this synergy issue,
it makes it
remains
almost
a problem.
impossible for collaboration, coordination, and cooperation. So if we want to have any meaningful impact in changing the story of policing in Nigeria, that's something we need to address.
All right. Bulama, before we go to post-election, now, are we going to remain with this problem now that the elections are over, the security operatives have been redeployed? This is one question for you. And then the second one, if you move around Nigeria, because you live in London, but it's as good as you live in Nigeria, because your attention is here all the time, which is really good. On highway from here to Kaduna, you see policemen holding the bags of contractors. I mean, people working on the highways, and you see them even holding shovel and all that for them, taking children to school. How do we get it right?
No, I mean, to Dr. Kabiru Adamu's point around the factionalization or fragmentation of the police force, I think what happened in Nigeria is that the police is the most overburdened institution in terms of security and law enforcement, but they are the most deprived in terms of resources. And so what happened was they failed in each and every part of their responsibilities. And then what governments ended up doing was to balkanize the institution, was to fragment it and take out parts that are failing in order to institute a new institution like the customs or the road safety. Even EFCC or ICPC were all part of the police, but then they were carved out of the police, and you end up having then a police officer heading them again. Now, the impact of that, like Dr. Kabiru said, is that there is no synergy and coordination between the security and law enforcement agents, because you have divided them into different smaller units. And in addition to that, you have put them under different departments and ministries. In the United States, for example, after the September 11th attack, they established the Office for Homeland Security, and which became responsible for coordinating all the efforts of internal security in the US. And what I would recommend to the new Nigerian government is to set up a similar structure, either under the Office of the National Security Advisor, which is not functioning as it should right now, or under the Ministry of Interior, or create a new department called the Department of Internal Security or National Security, and bring together all the heads and leaders of these smaller units into the same one-stop center where they will plan together, coordinate together, and implement and review together. If you did that, then you will see more efficiency and effectiveness on the part of our security forces. With regards to whether things can continue to remain the same, I can tell you, Malam Hamza, that insecurity is becoming an existential threat for Nigeria. And the new government had promised that security, national security is going to be their key priority. And they have no option. It is a complete no-brainer for them to do that, for them to make security the topmost priority. And if you are going to do that, you need to do many things. But what you need to do is to segment these things into short-term objectives, medium-term reforms, and long-term reforms. And we can come and talk about what you need to do in each of these stages. But what you need to do is a comprehensive, holistic review of the Nigerian security architecture to make it more effective. Perhaps the first place to start with is for you to make good use of the current numbers you have before you even start talking about increasing numbers, because increasing numbers is going to take months, if not years. And therefore, the easiest thing to do is to mandate the security and law enforcement agents to ensure that every single police officer and soldier and other paramilitary officers that is deployable is deployed to the field. Nobody should be left to go and be guarding VIPs. You are right. When you mentioned the Abuja-Kaduna highway, yes. I remember that when the Kaduna airport became dysfunctional, VIPs had to fly. When the Abuja airport became dysfunctional, VIPs had to fly from Kaduna or to land in Kaduna and then travel to Abuja. See the amount of security that was deployed at that period. Not a single security or violent incident was reported in the recorded in the Abuja-Kaduna highway or expressway at that time, because VIPs were flying through Kaduna. The government deployed security, and they were able to bring insecurity under control for the month that the refurbishment continued. Immediately after the refurbishment, they were removed. And then we saw insecurity returning on the road. And now we see police officers on the Abuja-Kaduna highway only when they are becoming errand boys and girls to contractors, some of them foreign contractors, not to demean anyone. I mean, the point is that we need to have the political will. Government has to have the political will to bring insecurity under control. And like I said, this is becoming an existential threat for our country. No country will thrive if your citizens are living in constant fear. No investor will come and invest in Nigeria, especially in northern Nigeria, however much advert you will do, no matter how many workshops and investment summit you will gather, if investors know that there is no security in rural areas, in towns and cities of northern Nigeria, they would never invest. And therefore, our country will continue to lag behind until and unless we get on top of insecurity in the country.
All right. Thank you very much, Bulama. We'll go on a short break, viewers, and when we return, the conversation continues. Don't go away.
Now, as part of efforts to support Africa's goal of strengthening...
Now, looking at the activity chart, as you can see right here, a total volume of 130...
a Boko Haram crisis that at that time was restricted to Yobe.
How secure are they? You can see security men with blood.
This is the road leading up to the...
If you look at England squad, you are looking at EPL, you are looking at their names. You are not looking at...
Welcome back. If you are just joining us, this is Daily Politics on Trust TV. Do well to follow us across all our social platforms on Facebook, Twitter, and watch us live on YouTube. I still have Bulama Bukarti, human rights lawyer and fellow at the Tony Blair Institute for Global Change. He joins us from London, and we have in the studio Dr. Kabiru Adamu, security and intelligence expert and managing director Beacon Consulting. Welcome back to the program.
Thank you.
Yes, Doctor, before we went on break, you had Bulama saying, whatever we do, not to worry about it. We have to get the security architecture correct. We have to get it right for investors. We have to get it right for economic diversification. We have to get it right for people to live in peace and harmony. Now, talking about Benue, you have had it within a week. Nearly 80 people have been killed, some in Guma and others in the other local government area. What is your take? How are we going to get it right in Benue? Benue is just stone throw from Abuja.
So, first off, why are we where we are? Why have we as a people accepted this level of failure? For me, that is significant. If we go into the next administration with this level of acceptance of failure, especially in a very critical area as security, then sadly, we are going to repeat the cycle that happened before President Muhammadu Buhari, into President Muhammadu Buhari, and sadly, that would happen after President Muhammadu Buhari. What am I trying to say? This president-elect and his deputy, they released a manifesto called Renewed Hope. I took time to go through that manifesto. It has provisions for security. And if I remember well, in section 5 of that manifesto, that's where security was extensively discussed. And as an expert, I can tell you some of the commitments are good.
But how sure are we, Doctor? I'm not sorry to quote you. How sure are we that they are really in tune with what is in that document?
It's work in progress. It is not comprehensive enough. And with all sense of responsibility, I will urge them to open up their hearing and acceptance so that they listen to advice from experts and persons who mean well. Bulama has made some very good recommendations.
Yes.
I have made some as well. There are several persons who understand this issue, who mean well, and who say they should open up. The second thing I want to say is, I learned this from the Europeans. They say trust is good, but control is better.
Okay.
We have made a mistake in previous times, and we're still making that mistake. You just mentioned that. In fact, I will tell you that in my consultancy, between the 4th and 5th week of March, and the 1st and 2nd weeks of April, about 330 Nigerians have been killed.
330 Nigerians
have been killed
God.
Within a space of 4 weeks. Now,
this between March and April.
End of March.
End of March. That is post-election.
Very specific. I said 4th week and 5th week of March. And then 1st week and 2nd week of April, 330 Nigerians. I don't know any country in the world where you have that number of their citizens being killed and people behave as if nothing
Nobody is
happened.
saying.
When the Naira redesign policy was attempted and the governors felt it was threatening their political existence, we saw what happened.
They
responded actively. They went to court. We saw the Minister of Justice and several others responding. Now, how many of such persons have you seen their response? So that is the point I'm trying to make. It is okay, and as a Muslim, I will pray for my leader. I will wish him well, but I must also put accountability measures. And that is where I call on the media. We need to drop the way we approached security previously. We now need to approach security with a lens of accountability. In other words, pick that renewed hope that has been released by the president-elect and dissect it into what I will call KPIs, key performance indicators, and then engage the government along the lines of these key performance indicators. Now, that's just one component. The media, the fourth estate of the realm. Civil society organizations, they also have that responsibility. Engage the government from the lens of accountability. Develop key performance indicators and engage the government. Then every Nigerian should also engage the government along the lines of accountability. You've promised us XYZ. you must deliver.
Doctor, I hope they will not disown the manifesto as this government.
Well, if they
did.
disown
Yes.
it, we should also use the power at our disposal. In Hausa, I don't know how to translate it in English.
All right, Sarkin Yawa, Sarkin Karfi. Bulama, today there is angst because if you check the social media, and I'm sure you check that platform all the time, people are angry. President Buhari has moved to Saudi Arabia today for Umrah. This is at a time when over 80 people have been killed in Benue, 85 are still in custody in Zamfara. And just yesterday, his spokesman denied that the president even made any allusion to disposing presidential jets and all that. This is in addition to the promise of calling insecurity as three of his cardinal aims before he became president in 2015. Putting all this together, what is your take about this back and forth, please?
Look, unfortunately, insecurity deteriorated under President Buhari, even though, as you alluded to, he promised to restore security. And one of the major issues he wrote on to become president was that he was a former, or he is a former military general and therefore understands Nigeria's insecurity and can be the, if you like, the person to solve it. Unfortunately, if you look at the data in President Buhari's 7 years in office, from 29th May 2015 to 29th May 2022, that's last year, 55,430 Nigerians were killed, at least 55,430 Nigerians. That's an average of around 7,918 Nigerians per annum. We did not see that amount of fatalities in any year before Buhari's presidency.
Wow.
And thousands of Nigerians were abducted. Millions were displaced from their homes, especially in the north central, the northwest, and the southeast. And not only that, billions of naira were extorted. Remember that from December 2019 to this moment, over 1,000 school children were abducted from their schools. And for many of them, money exchanged hands before they were released. Some schools sold parts of their schools to pay ransom. We know that the students of the Birnin Kebbi, that's federal government Birnin Yawuri students that were abducted, 11 of them are still in custody about 22 months after they had been abducted. Even this week, we are talking about like 3 attacks on school. The university students in Zamfara, the secondary school students in Kaduna, and another set of students in Nasarawa or Niger. In no country in the world has the amount of kidnappings that happened in Nigeria's Buhari has ever happened. Nowhere in history in the world.
Wow. Bulama appeared very angry.
Bulama, we have to be a little bit mindful that data sometimes is determined by access. So I know as an example that in 2013, 13,000 Nigerians were killed. And, so we need to qualify that when we say, for instance, that on the average 7,000 Nigerians were killed, which I agree.
I mean, when you look at that on the average, of course, when you look at the year Boko Haram became the
Jamaat al-Ahl al-Dawat wal-Jihad was titled the world's deadliest terror group in the world. So I think we also need to be mindful of that as against the general statement saying that there is no part of the world.
Okay, and it appeared he wanted to say something. Yeah, go ahead, Bulama.
Yeah, I mean, I take Dr. Kabiru's point. He makes a mention of the fact that Boko Haram was listed as the deadliest terror group in the world in 2015. In that year, Doctor, check the data, Boko Haram killed 6,000 people. 6,000 people. And now we are talking about an average of 7,918 people per annum. And when I said nowhere in the world, what I made reference to was that nowhere in the world has history ever recorded that a whole school will be abducted. A whole village or a string of villages, all of them will be abducted. We know of times when 300, 400, 500 individuals were reported to have been abducted. Please, doctor, correct me if I am wrong. Where in history have you ever had that amount of abduction? Where in history have you ever had 1,000 students being abducted in a span of months in one country?
Yes, and Bulama, and you know, before you started talking on this last question I asked, of course, Doctor also mentioned the 310 people, right? Between ending of March and April. It's actually mind-boggling. Now, talking about things like this not happening anywhere in the world, maybe, Doctor, you should shed more light. Is it really normal for people to just go and abduct with malice and then go away with it? Look at these young children, boys and girls.
It is not normal. I remember my point around saying that we should take control and ensure accountability measures for the reason why it has quote unquote become normal is because we have accepted it. Each and every one of us as Nigerians are responsible for what is happening. Yes, the responsibility is in the hands of the government. Section 14, subsection 2 of the Constitution puts that responsibility in the government for the protection of lives and property. Yeah. But by accepting where the government has failed, yes, we as a people have also allowed it to happen. That's my point.
We should hold them to account.
We should hold them to account. And how do we do that?
Okay.
Today, in the media space, narratives have overshadowed the issue of security. Identity is given security. Ethnicity is given.
For instance, if security. It is in Benue, we say gunmen. If it is in Kaduna, or herdsmen, yeah, they say herdsmen.
The same threat element that would kill in Benue is given a different name when it goes to Kaduna. It's given a different name when it goes to Niger. So that's my point. We need to, especially the media, given the role of the media as the fourth estate of the realm, pick up that manifesto, pick up government policies. How many of us is aware that the President Buhari administration has gone far in the creation of an intelligence fusion center as well as the national incident crime base that is of world standard?
He has done that.
He is almost 80% completed.
But he couldn't finish it in 8 years, Doctor.
But my point is he inherited some challenges and he has done some things that he needs to be praised. Now, this is and if we don't speak about it, the incoming administration would not recognize the issues that have led to a failure to implement some of these noble policies.
Yeah.
Time will not allow me to go into what I consider as the good steps taken by the Buhari administration.
Okay.
I can mention the review of the Police Act, 2019, I think, or 2021, I'm not sure now, the revised national security strategy, the cyber security policy 2021, name them, all of this, and then the Intelligence Fusion Center as well as the National Incident Crime Based Center. All of these are good policies that were never considered before the Buhari administration. But what is the challenge? In almost all of them, there is a single element, implementation. So there are certain elements within the government that instead of greasing the wheel of the progress of the government have become clocks in the function of the government. And for a lot of reasons, I won't mention their names here, but I hope the Transition Council and the incoming administration will look closely at those elements within the government that have served as clocks in greasing the wheel. Because where you have presidential directives, the Intelligence Fusion Center, there was a presidential directive as far back as 2018, if I remember well. In fact, in 2015, when President Buhari went to Borno, he made a declaration, a directive that he wanted the Fusion Center, one in the Northeast and one in Abuja. Today is 2023. Where is that Fusion Center?
Oh my God, very sad.
Apart from that, President Buhari, it was the acting president then, Osinbajo, that laid the foundation for this National Incident Crime Based Center. That center has been launched, but it is not operational just because one minister sat down and put his
KIV
paper, not KIV, asking questions that should have been at inception. And I don't have a problem with asking questions. Ask the questions, but solve the problem and allow
move
this
on,
noble intention. Because now a legacy that would have been written under President Buhari administration is not likely to be written. All because one person felt he needed to show his interest. And there are so many of them. Implementation has been a major challenge.
Very good. Thank you very much.
While we're dragging with the implementation, lives are being lost. Just to buttress the point made by Bulama. In 2022, 11,000 plus Nigerians were killed.
Oh my God, it's really sad. And I think some of these things you are mentioning is just a matter of nomenclature also, because Bulama also mentioned them. But that is this home security and all that, where there will be synergy and all that.
Sadly, I hate to disappoint Bulama. It's not likely that they are going to do that.
Oh my God.
The manifesto.
But Bulama, we are running short of time, but I want to have your take on the way forward for the next administration. How can the Tinubu administration succeed in putting together all the security apparatus, the security architecture to get it right and save lives?
No, I think the Tinubu administration has a big challenge, but they also have a golden opportunity to prove to Nigerians that the confidence they reposed in them was not misplaced. And in the interest of time, I am just going to highlight one area in each of the three segments I alluded to in the beginning, which is the short term, the medium term, and the long term. I think for the short term, what you need to do is to enhance the capacity of Nigeria's security, law enforcement, and intelligence agencies to do their job well. Okay. And to do that, the first thing you need to do is to ensure good or proper management of resources, but because we know that resources are being misapplied or sometimes even misappropriated, there are credible allegations of mega corruption going on in the security and law enforcement sector in Nigeria. The second is you need to get logistics, communication, and transportation right. Number three, you need to leverage technology to make early reporting by communities easier so that security and law enforcement agencies will be able to respond on time. In the medium term, I think the Tinubu-Shettima administration need to seriously consider whether the federal government wants to continue to retain all security and law enforcement powers in Nigeria, because they need to have an in-depth conversation with Nigerians, with experts, with state governors on whether there is need to devolve some of the powers to state governments so that state governments can also play their role in ensuring communal security in the country. Wow. And in the long term, we need to invest in education and in the economy in order to create good paying jobs and create good opportunities for Nigerians to stay away from crime and terrorism and to build their lives and livelihood in a good economy. If you don't get the economy right, poverty and unemployment would continue to thrive in the country, and poverty and unemployment will lead to insecurity, and insecurity will exacerbate poverty and unemployment. It is a vicious cycle. And I think the Tinubu administration has a good opportunity to break that cycle in the medium and the long term.
All right. Thank you very much, Bulama Bukarti, human rights lawyer and fellow at the Tony Blair Institute for Global Change. We really thank you very much for joining us in this program.
Thank you. Thank you very much for having me.
And we hope to have you again.
Sure.
And right here in the studio, Dr. Kabiru Adamu, security and intelligence expert and managing director, Beacon Council. We thank you for coming to the program and for your informed perspective.
Thank you very much.
And viewers, above all, we earnestly pray that those that matter have listened to this program and they will act appropriately, especially the incoming administration. And that's a wrap on today's program. Thanks for watching, and do join us again. I'm Hamza Idris.